This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
I really, at times, don't like reading the news. There is, of course, and this is, to some extent, I guess you could say, the phenomenon of young people. Maybe because my father would read the papers back to front to back whole day. He would read the papers and he would read the papers again, all the papers. Over and over, over and over, over and over. He would start reading once he got the papers with his morning tea, or if he didn't wake up that early, by at least lunchtime he would start reading the papers into the afternoon. And perhaps it could be just because there was a point in time where, that was how you got informed of the world. Because when I was small, you didn't really have the same access to information, right? Cable didn't exist when I was 4. There were satellite systems, but the amount of channels you had were limited. So your exposure, the window to the wider world, wasn't quite the same. Cable opened things up, but it's still television. So it was still limited. Then the internet came and just blew everything out of the water. Now, you could be informed of the wider world, so there's a lot more variety and excitement when you have the world of news and current events and entertainment news and political news, etc., and all sorts of tragedies and disasters. All of that is there. And it's unfortunate that I'm implying in my statements that it's there primarily for entertainment. Because it's not as though some accident in Southeast Asia, we could do anything about that. We can't participate in the process to improve things over there. We could just watch and maybe learn. That's one of the things. We could learn from the mistakes others make, because that's essentially what university is. University is learning from the experience of people who went through the motions and discovered new things before. And in terms of a society, basically that means mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The question is, do you want to make the same mistake 2 and 3 other countries did before you, or just observe what happened there and try your best to apply that knowledge in your unique situation? So what's left for local news? We don't need our local media houses to necessarily tell us what's going on around the world, but we do need it for what's going on here in TNT. And at times it's not a nice thing. And I've brought this up before, but I miss the days when I was 15, 16, 17. And to me, for the most part, I didn't understand time, and I didn't understand the passage of years. And when people say life is short, when you're a kid, you don't understand that life is short. And most of the time you're confronted with death, it's people that are older than you. So to you, it's like, it doesn't have quite the same tragedy. But then as you get older, and correct me if I'm wrong, the more you hear about people passing away younger than you, the more it leaves a bitter, sour taste in your mouth, to put it very lightly. Of course, I am just old enough, I would say, that I am older than a significant majority of the murder victims in this country. That's bad enough. Now there's a situation with an 11-year-old girl, and I do believe this is not the only recent report, but this report is somewhat contentious because an 11-year-old girl passed away, and there are two competing narratives as to the reasons why. Essentially, the family is accusing school bullying being the underlying cause of her death, and the school is questioning if the child has been a victim of physical and/or sexual abuse at home. Now, that's a hell of a thing to say. At this point, it's not necessarily clear one way or the other which one is right. To those who are not directly involved in the situation, I think there will be a very small group of people who are directly involved who, generally speaking, know the truth. Unless it is a lot messier than either side is telling us. I suspect that at the end of the day, one side will know, well, we didn't do it, so it's probably the other reason. Or maybe randomly there's a third consideration that we haven't seen or heard yet. Can't necessarily speculate that far. But what I can do is say, well, I guess question rather, how did it get to this point? Now the school is saying that the body was, the Secretary General of the SDMS is saying that initial information suggested the child had bruises and unconfirmed reports of possible sexual abuse was circulating. Now, they are stressing only an autopsy could determine cause of death, right? But according to them, initial indicators, this is a quote, suggest the body was bruised and battered. A police report was made previously of bruises and battered marks on this child. And apparently, there was an official police report apparently made of sexual abuse. However, the family is saying, well, when we took the child to seek medical attention, I believe, there was no attempt to involve the police because there were no reports of, and this is where it gets tricky, because they're not saying that she wasn't the victim of physical trauma, hence where the bullying comes from. But they are saying there were no marks. So I'm assuming they mean no marks of domestic abuse where you would see people, certain patterns of physical bruising. claim that medical examinations, including x-rays, reportedly found no visible external injuries consistent with being abused. I think that's the key point, because they're saying that the child told them that she was pushed against a concrete sink and that caused her initial injury on her shoulder. Now, one of the things that I don't necessarily understand, her right hand and upper shoulder was paining because she might have braced herself with her right hand. But what I don't understand is, how does her health situation go from that to this? She had a diagnosis of gastroenteritis. Let me make sure I don't misspeak. An infection-induced inflammation of the stomach and intestines causing diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, and abdominal cramps. Now, I'm not entirely sure exactly how it is supposed to be connected, or if it's an extremely unfortunate coincidence. One of the things that this highlights, unfortunately, because it seemed as though while her health was in distress, what we might take for granted as normal ailments that should not be life-threatening, perhaps, because her condition, she was discharged from Mount Hope with medication and the diagnosis of gastroenteritis, and then apparently her condition deteriorated again, right? She was warded eventually. I don't know how a physical ailment could lead to such a bad, unless there was some bacterial infection. But it's just shocking to me that there's no clear sign as to how she died and how frail a child's body could be. And now we are left to have to deal with a situation where, I'll be honest, I don't know who to believe, because I am predisposed to disbelieve the school, because I have heard of even more heinous things being actively attempted to be covered up by a school. Suicides, gang rape. So trying to cover up bullying is technically not outside the realm of possibilities. But at the same time, the situation as described doesn't necessarily make sense to me, a non-doctor, and I obviously don't have the files, that is to say, described by the family. And it's unfortunate that we've reached this point, because we've had cases in families where bad things happen. And now you're projecting onto this family, but you will be projecting on the SMDS and the school as well. The Secretary General, by the way, doesn't have to be a liar for the school to attempt to cover it up. He could be like McDonald Jacobs. He might not know what's going on day to day in that specific situation and has to rely on what people tell him. Meanwhile, the reason why her health was so bad could have been long-term ongoing physical and mental abuse. That could be bullying at school. That could also be abuse at home. So, but the long and short is, an 11-year-old is dead. And she's not dead because of some medical condition that we could not have prevented. And of course, if it is bullying at school, then it highlights a wider problem. If it isn't, which it might not be, it still highlights an ongoing problem. One, the latter is difficult at times to detect and to intervene. And the other, the former, might be growing if we don't figure out a way, that is to say, school violence, bullying, and the like, if we can't figure out a way of how to treat with it. Now, the Minister of Education, he had to come out and say expelled students would not be abandoned, but they are placed in alternative programs designed to address behavioral issues. That's nice. And on some level, I can understand him saying that. But him saying that is not quite as effective as the Prime Minister having a properly well thought out, crafted message on the matter. And I'm not saying that the Prime Minister has bad intentions and is just doing things willy-nilly. But what I am saying is the communication of our politicians and leaders in this country has been lacking, is lacking, and I would rather it not be lacking in the future. Also, one of the issues I have is, while the problem is getting worse, now I don't know to what degree, and I did say this, for people who want to think I'm just only bashing the government, I did say the issue with the PNM's approach was that they were too complacent, they were too concerned about social implications in the long term. They did potentially sacrifice too much of the short term, that is to say, a disruptive element in class, and the other students have a right to not be distracted by something that disruptive. We're not talking about a talkative student. We're not talking about a class jokester. We're talking about school violence, significant and habitual rule breaking, etc., right? Like when there was the fight in front of the police officers, and the police officers were overwhelmed just because of the sheer scope of the fracas going on. This was a while ago, right? Sometime, I think last year, unless I'm mixing up the dates, it's when police go into schools has been somewhat of a reoccurring situation, right? So far, it seems as though the minister is saying they will go to these programs, but he's not necessarily saying that they are new programs. So perhaps under the PNM regime, it's that they underutilize the programs, but I have a hard time having faith in what's pre-existing, because ultimately speaking, we are seeing the situation decline further and further. If this poor 11-year-old girl was the victim of bullying and that was the cause, maybe it's a wake-up call. I think there was another situation of bullying. I hope I'm not mistaking it. Okay, no, that was international. It's important to look things up and the news starts to blend together. Given the prevalence of suicides and school violence, I have no reason to think bullying is going to somehow just be mythically under control. And that's why the family's concerns, unfortunately, are valid. But as the Secretary General said, all right, let's go with the evidence. As cold as that sounds. But even if it isn't bullying, maybe it's still a wake-up call with regards to certain things that need to be taken more seriously. Because look how fragile a child's life is. We don't have that. You know what? Back in the day, it was fine for a child to get scrapes and bruises and maybe get sick because they were out and about and they were amongst other kids and they got a little sick and they were out in the yard and they got a little sick, and that's fine. I'm not saying that we should wrap children in plastic bubbles and overdo the sanitization efforts, because that's a good way to get children who are too fragile. The thought now is with peanut allergies, it's mainly because people are so concerned about peanut allergies. That's how the child gets peanut allergies. They're not exposed enough to peanuts. Or I know in one case, someone I know who works with food, they had a shrimp allergy all their life, and all of a sudden now they couldn't eat it, but worked carefully with it. Now all of a sudden, the exposure Not saying that exposure will always work, I'm not a doctor. But the exposure has led her to not be allergic anymore. So we can't necessarily wrap children in a bubble and try to protect them and prevent them from everything. But obviously, there is a limit to exposing your child to risk, right? You have to give them a chance to fall down. I get that. You don't necessarily want that chance to be them on the wrong side of a railing over a precipice. Yeah, they could run wrong in the yard and fall down. Yeah, they could maybe try to climb up on a bed and fall down. You don't want them to climb a skyscraper and fall down. Look outside a fourth floor window and play over the edge and fall down. You don't want them to get so sick that they pass away. One of the issues is, at the end of the day, to what degree do we have confidence in the rehabilitation systems of this country? Because I have a lot of questions. Now, granted, I don't expect great results. Rehabilitation is not an easy thing. And at the end of the day, the people need to want it. And if a child, for whatever reason, is going down the wrong path, they might not be always mature enough to want to switch directions. Sometimes it was almost as though they're forced, some children, because they're not bad intention. They're just a little disruptive. And you mix that with maybe the wrong approach from a teacher, the wrong approach from an institution. It could snowball into something tragic. Some minor rule breaking, and the child doesn't understand and feels they're unfairly treated, so they get upset. Because they're upset, they lash out. Because they lash out, they get punished again. They still feel that the situation is unfair because they only lashed out because the situation was unfair. Not understanding you have to have your limits to how you react to things. And instead of being taught properly, they're punished again. And it could continue to snowball. And some of them, they might want a way out because they don't understand. And perhaps at times we take it for granted what kids may or may not understand. That's the whole point of school. It's to help them develop so that they can become adults. And as adults, then you have a reasonable expectation that they understand certain things. And while growing up, the question is not what should they understand at a certain age, because development is not uniform. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Not the same tools will work on every child. And our system is basically a one-size-fits-all. What happened? You're stupid? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And the issue is, based on what I know, I don't have a lot of faith in rehabilitation in general. Because we're quick to condemn. And I get it, there will always be a small subgroup of the rule breakers, or for adults, criminals, who will reject rehabilitation for whatever reason. But you can't make that assumption on everybody. But it's almost as though that's the assumption too many people in our society want to make, including some of those who are supposed to be part of the rehabilitation process. And at the end of the day, do we have a successful track record at that? Because this now, we might be forced to find a solution. Otherwise, we will end up in a situation as one of a caller from Maraval that I will never forget. I will never forget, because it horrified me what he said, but I couldn't necessarily say that there wasn't any truth in what he was saying. That perhaps a whole generation of our young people are essentially lost. Obviously, it won't be all, but the implication being is that if your child is of a certain age and is a delinquent, we might not have anything in place to do anything to try to get him to not be a delinquent, to try to encourage him to not be a delinquent. We have nothing. We as a society do not have the means to help you help this child. And in some cases, the parents are trying to do the best they can. That varies from circumstance to circumstance. But the point is, whether they don't know what else to do, or they don't have the means to do what needs to be done, and we end up with what we end up. And I'm not surprised if children like that end up, at least a good chunk of them end up being criminals, because that's the path, to some extent, that society has laid out for them. There are 800 professionals in the Student Support Services Division. I'm not entirely sure if that's enough, to be honest. I know that those who are active, whether they, or even the ones before whose contracts weren't renewed, they have to deal with multiple schools on a schedule. Each school has its own challenges. Some schools are a lot more challenging than others. I don't know if 800 professionals are enough, because it's not 800 of social workers. It's 800 that include social workers, guidance counselors, psychologists, and special education teachers. And I would argue you probably need 800 just for things like social workers. But I could be wrong. I mean, think about it this way. In primary school, an SCA class nationally is around 10,000 plus students, which means the primary school population is around 50 to 60,000 students or more. And a fraction of the 800 are social workers. Now, maybe my math is wrong, maybe I'm overdoing it. But I know that tutor said a lot of contracts weren't renewed. Now, they implied in their statements that there are none, and I guess that's a mistaken interpretation, and they should have been more specific if their numbers or what they presented doesn't accurately reflect the truth. But dare I say, one of the concerns I have with governance in this country, both from the previous administration and now, is the claims of wanting to do everything right by the population, but then in practice you do it on the cheap. And by doing it on the cheap, you sacrifice something, because you don't know what to sacrifice to get the necessary resources to treat with any situation. And ironically, as much as the UNC wants to claim, well, the PNM reduced jobs when they came into power in 2015, that's nice. But in this specific case, as far as I'm aware, I have a hard time taking it seriously when you're espouting the need for social programs to help with rehabilitation, and the need to fix the situation in the schools, because that's the second priority after the crime, but also the need to fix the crime because it's connected, in my opinion, when it seems as though you have shortchanged the social programs and safety nets for our school children. I don't know if it was a political thing where you were swapping people out, because the person I know that was fired was not no PNM supporter, just by the way. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, a lot to get through with Ashraf. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fanzone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
They believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Problems trying to get aroused, women
loss
who
of
have
libido.
loss of libido, and women who have problems actually trying to achieve an orgasm, something as simple as that. So all of those things tend to happen a little bit further along after the hot flashes and the night sweats, but they are real symptoms. They do exist, and they get pushed under the rug quite a lot. So they are commonly underdiagnosed, they're underreported, they're underdiagnosed, they're undertreated.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here and talk about the WSND Content Capital. Sean Michael Small, joined as always on Fridays with disaster management expert and soon to be retired police officer Ashraf Ali, someone who has had a lot of national security topics coming forth in front of him on this show in the last year. Now, perhaps it's a bit more political, you know, at least for now, although the SOE is going to be, extension is going to be formally debated today. It'll be interesting to see what comes from that.
And that's a foregone conclusion.
Basically, right? Because simple majority goes through.
Foregone conclusion.
Here's the thing, and one of my issues with the government is they have a track record of not always fully debating things. And that started with the budgets, right? So, and I think this is why the PNM's concerns over the private members, they can't necessarily be cast aside. Although there's a lot of, no, they did it, no, we didn't do it kind of things to say that the PNM did it to the UNC before. And there's a part of me that has no sympathy if you did set the precedent up, right? But the flip side is, and now, because I said this about in America with impeachments of the presidents, I'm like, you want to impeach Trump? I think it's dumb, but you all did impeach Clinton for something equally dumb, or even dumber, to be honest. So, you know, that's a you problem. Yeah. But this is my country, and I guess it wouldn't be irresponsible if I didn't try to say we should try to be better than. I'm saying that a lot these days. I'm like, I understand the PNM might have done it before. Why is that justification for you to do it as well? I have no sympathy for the PNM if they did it before, right? But why is that justification? But let me not derail the thing. Daily Review, something came up that I am surprised this is even a thing. I don't understand why it has to be a thing. I would argue that at least to some extent it's because of the minister that it's a thing. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily all his fault. But we have digitized our immigration forms, right? Our immigration platform. And apparently when asked about the cost, the Minister of Homeland Security decided to say, well, I can't reveal the cost out of national security considerations, right? Let me just get the... Anything related? Well, anyway, the Minister of Homeland Security, I don't want to read the whole article trying to find the specific line of how it was put across. Doesn't want to reveal it because of security considerations. My question is, why? What would revealing the price of something, what will it reveal that would undermine its effectiveness? Because one of the things you see around the world, you don't hear about the capabilities of a unit or a plane or a tank, but what you do see in the public sphere is the cost, because there has to be some level of accountability to the public.
So, morning Sean, morning to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I think we have been in a position for the last number of years where when we hear numbers coming from political entities, we question those numbers, or we criticize and we don't really trust them because, again, sometimes they've never been forthcoming with information. I don't see the issue with saying what is the cost. It may not be the full cost because it's a working cost.
So what you said also, sometimes you give a cost and people might think that's too much money, not understanding the context of it, because in your experience, the kind of equipment for national security, this is not on the cheap. Police cars should not be as cheap as civilian cars.
Exactly. So there would be a cost because putting an integrated system of that nature within the immigration department is not just buying a computer or buying some servers and telling them, okay, it's going to work. There's a lot of background and network system to put in place together with support software application and upkeep of the software application maintenance, because it's data collection. So there's a cost attached to all of that. You may not be able to give the full cost because it's a running cost, right? And it's a pilot. I would say it's a new project. You may end up with little hiccups because with a new system, sometimes the system may become overloaded where everybody is jumping on the system and it could end up with short drops in the system, and you may have some deficiencies in the system, but it's a working cost. But at the same time, we are so accustomed that when anybody makes, any minister or anybody gives a cost, we are so hinged on that cost itself that nothing else that's said afterwards are the only cost we're looking at. But I do not see the need to say you cannot give the cost. You could have give a bold figure, a cost. This is for me. I don't know why the reason why the minister didn't choose to, but I would say how we look at, because at the end of the day, everything right now is about how we spend taxpayers' money.
Because this is not something that's just about quality of life, although that's a quote there. The minister said it's because it was the same quote, and I only took the back half of it for another point. Because of the security involved, we don't want to discuss the cost at this time. Again, I don't know how the cost will reveal methods. I mean, you spend a lot of money, the system is robust, okay. I mean, on some level, to the criminals, the only thing that will matter is if you spend too little money, which means that you probably did it cheap and I have something to exploit. But I think a lot of it comes down to politics, in the sense of if the public perceives it as too high or too low, they'll have an issue. But also, it seems as politicians, and maybe to some extent leaders in this country, they don't like to set goals or to give parameters or context, because then what happens? The public holds you to that.
Exactly.
So if you say we spend this amount of money, and all of a sudden then 2 months later, well, the system broke down and we have to revert back to paper, the public will be most upset. But if we don't know how much money is spent, then we don't know how upset to be. It might just be you see, them chuppities again, and then we just kind of stoops and move on, as opposed to you spent $100 million to do this thing, and I'm just throwing out a figure, I don't know, right? But the point is to emphasize the point that you spent a lot of money and it failed. How is this, good governance kind of situation?
I don't think that we should be using the word broadly across accountability on the context of national security. Everything is national security. It can't be national security is the context in which you don't want to disclose how funds are being utilized.
Yeah.
Yes, national security has a budget. And we expect for accountability of national security budgetary allocations. National security is not cheap. Infrastructure put in place, physical infrastructure put in place, and we are fully in a digital age that we need to, and digital technology and security of digital technology is not cheap.
Mm-hmm. Like take the U.S. military, for example. They are modern aircraft like the F-22. They don't want to reveal certain specifications of the plane, its performance numbers, its metrics, right?
Yes.
Same thing with the F-35. However, things like costs and project overruns, that's all over joint committees in the American legislation and matters of public record.
Because there must be a level of accountability in how public funds are being utilized.
Now let me pivot. Because there's a quote there. There cannot be a cost attached to improving the quality of life of citizens.
I agree.
And this is the same minister that apparently had to make a fiscal choice of body armor versus body cameras, where I said from day one, why not both? And my thing is, and yes, I am pulling things together, right? The Prime Minister said her priority is crime fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it was the case that body cameras would cost $3.8 billion, let's use that figure. You know, the same figure as the back pay for the PSA's 10% back pay.
Yeah.
If it costs $3.8 billion, then at that level of expense, I'd be like, maybe as a society, this is debatable.
See, now...
But we're not talking about that level of expense. We're talking about something that technically I think the government could find the money for.
But we have history on our side as our experience that over the years we have been utilizing the word cost on national security and trying to change and improve the lives of citizens. And when you actually get to the bottom line of it, all those monies that are spent, how has it improved the lives of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? So if we are utilizing, so it's not because of this current administration, it's about administrations over the years and their lack of accountability of how they're spending funds. They may, whether we believe politicians are different. However, politics remains the same. Politicians are different. Politics remains the same. This is pure politics. They are just following the same narratives of others. And this is where I am saying, and I agree with you with the conversation we were having just now. Why do the same thing? Why keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome?
Yeah.
We have blamed or we have criticized the last administration in their lack of accountability, the lack of performance. I mean, those are argumentable points, right? I'm not arguing those points, right? But those are things that people that they put forward. Fair enough. There's argument on both sides. If this administration wants to look at it differently and go in a different light and don't follow the same narratives of the past administration, they will be getting some slack. They will be criticized because we have a tendency always saying, so why didn't do this what the last administration do? I am not here to come and do the same thing, because if that is the same thing, then all we did was what? Is there the same administration operating the same, and we have a different name? It can't be. This administration has to do their own. Now I'm saying, when they're doing their own, it wouldn't be easy. But if you keep doing the same, you'll have a problem. I saw a statement there where where even the same minister indicated that they're questioning the SOE, right? But here,
which minister is this?
Same Minister of Homeland Security said that they question the SOE, and what came out to me, and I didn't like that at all, is that you said all we did is dust off the same SOE that they used in 2004 and we bring it back. Is that really what the SOE is supposed to be? cut and paste of another administration.
Well, there's no curfew, so arguably.
Exactly.
This year, all of the SOEs of this year is even less than those.
My take on it is that why should we be complaining? Because you are asking me to complain and you're telling me the same thing we're using. And I'm saying, Sean, this since the SOE started, or the last SOEs, I am saying both SOEs cannot be the same. It can't be doing the same SOE. You can't be using the same SOE over and over and over. Same principle, same structure, everything, and expect a different result.
But here's the thing though, because yes, the PNM did an SOE with no curfew, and that seemed to be palatable to the public. So the new government did an SOE with no curfew. Different reasoning, but by the time they came to the extension, we back to the violent crimes, right? Yes. And one could argue that's what this SOE is for. The threat against now the president apparently is satisfied, the low-level PNM functionary is satisfied that the UNC government has given her, yes, because it was completely unnecessary to insult her in that way, given the fact that she has not denied you of anything important. They preemptively attacked the independent bench over the SOSO bill, right? But the thing with the body camera debate though, and yes, listen, I'll say this, the previous PNM administration was very lethargic with regards to national security issues and national security spending. But what makes the body camera debate even more critical in a way, I would argue the border security is just is incredibly bad already, right? And you could argue maybe even worse. But the thing with the border camera issue is not only has technology improved to kind of overcome some of the difficulties that you would have had logistically and technically with body cameras that were bought previously, but also I think the public demand for it has grown.
And the ones that the organization currently hold, there is no explanation or lack of explanation as to the use, what you have, what data that you have stored, so I am this is me. You want more body cameras, and I am asking you, what did you do with the ones that I gave you?
Well,
if you are making excuses that it is not good, okay, I'll take in that. The life of it is the charging life very good. There's also a software system that we had to work with that is too expensive to continue. Well, then I am simply saying, during the period that you had it, what significant change was had during the period that you had it?
Here's the thing, because I think you are trying to apply a reasonable piece of logic. They have issues with the body cameras. Right.
Sorry. Too reasonable. Oh.
Yeah, you're being too reasonable. Because you're looking at it from, there are issues with the body cameras, so we should get replacements. But in my mind, we're in a state of emergency. We're in a state of emergency, and you have said this, and the Congress of the People, who are part of the coalition of interest, have come out this week to say this. Hey, one of the functions of a body camera is evidence collection. Right? You go, you interview some people. Now it's no longer he said, she said, or believe the two police officers or believe me. Right? Now it's no, we have video evidence. Right? We have a traffic stop. We have video evidence of what you were doing at the traffic stop, so on and so on. Right? So we're in a state of emergency. This is also a police tool to help police investigations. Dealing with crime is a priority, and yet there seems to be no sense of urgency whatsoever with regards to buying body cameras, because they said, well, the old body camera is bad, and the order that we placed, or somebody placed, but I can't remember who placed the order, right? But the order that was placed, it's too expensive. We've spoken about this before, right? We could get cheaper body cameras, right? Because there cannot be a cost attached to improving the quality of life of citizens. But we could get cheaper body cameras, so let's do it, right? Meanwhile, that's nice. You cancel the order. You say you could get cheaper body cameras, but you never said that what is the time frame if you put in a new order, if you started the procurement process, even if you're still going through the discovery of what's available, right? No mention of that. So to me, when they say it's insufficient, it's not it's insufficient, we need something better. It's insufficient, so that's the excuse to cast it aside and just ignore the whole thing. That is the sense I get. It's not direct. It's subtle, it's indirect, but it's so repeated, I can't help but think that there are some people who are like, nah, we don't want body cameras. I wonder why.
Well, I think the latter is true.
There you go. It's,
right?
I don't want to believe it, but it's kind of repeatedly hitting me in the face.
Because if you have body cameras, it means that you have a level of accountability that you need to answer questions about. Not all police officers, and I would say 90% of the police officers, and I'm not being biased, right? There's a small percentage of police officers out there who does some things contrary to the law, right? I am not going to say criminal acts, but then there are some who actually do criminal acts, right? The vast majority of police officers are hard-working individuals. Here's the challenge with some of them. It is not that alone. It is because when you have a lot of bad apples, everybody is considered to be a bad apple. So you have a lot of tension, a lot of conflicts among the good ones who are trying to do the proper thing by enforcement the laws. This morning I come in here and I'm listening on the radio, and the conversation is about we have all the laws and police not enforcing laws. I just sit down and laughing, I'm laughing to myself. You all know what you are asking for? Are we ready in Trinidad and Tobago?
Nope.
For full enforcement of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago? We have laws for almost every single thing that we could think about in this country. The amount of offenses on the books of Trinidad and Tobago. If the police service and the law enforcement agencies who have who the responsibility, some of the responsibility fall under, take the appropriate action of enforcing laws, Sean, we would be in a full police state.
One thing, a couple of things though, as we're going to wind this up. Body cameras is not just about police.
It is not.
Because there was a situation where they had a physical altercation with a licensing officer, and it came out. Traffic wardens, licensing officers, and soldiers when they have to interact with the public. Because we saw the public outcry with regards to American military intervention in alleged drug smuggling boats. I say alleged because technically none of it has been proven in a court of law, but after the first couple of boats, I'm pretty sure it wasn't some random fisherman going from a port with suspected drug smuggling activity, right? It's like, who is going to put their life in their own hands at that point? That said, the public didn't like it. But the public also wants the soldiers to help the police.
Right.
The police don't even have, the soldiers don't have the same training that the police have. If we want to question the police, why do we somehow think magically soldiers who are not trained to deal with customer service or anything like that? That's not the job. But we want them now to go in a front-facing, public-facing role in something as complex as crime fighting. And we're fine with this automatically? No. I'm like, if we want soldiers to be helping police more actively, if you think we didn't necessarily need body cameras before, we definitely need body cameras now, because it's not their training.
And then here's the flip side to it. Because if there is challenges within the legal entity that's supposed to be wearing body cameras, or should be wearing body cameras, then you're bringing support entities. Are they going to comply with the policy or the SOPs that is being adopted to utilize? Who is going to mandate? You see, when we go all the way out.
I cannot get over the fact that the level, because listen, I'm not even blaming the officers at this point, right? I'm blaming leadership. When you allow elements of an institution to ignore SOPs, standard operating procedures, right? But then, first of all, that's an indictment on the leadership, not necessarily You know, I don't know the chain of command and who has the responsibility to discipline the immediate supervisors, right? Because I know, and I've shared this with you, one anecdote of the sergeant arguing with the officer in the station in front of the public over the officer basically trying to give the private citizen the run around. No, you have to go here, there. And the sergeant is like, you're not supposed to be saying that. So, but to me, this is where the executive leadership comes into play. But then also the step above that, because if the executive leadership cannot right the ship of the organization, then the buck doesn't stop at the commissioner of police feet alone, and then you could just wash your hands and say, well, it's his fault. The buck yes, exactly, it goes to the top. And as you pointed out, to be fair, this is an inherited situation, whether it's from the Dr. Rowley administration, or from the partnership, or from the Manning administration before that, or so on and so on. And one can make the case that it was a growth.
Yes, it was.
Right? It was a growth. So I do not understand how it is, and maybe this is because the public at times, we don't have good leadership and discourse in this country on certain things, right? So at times the public doesn't really fully get invested in complex things. To say that our police have members who just disregard standard operating procedures and we kind of leave it there is beyond ridiculous to me. And the fact that the politicians, they don't even venture into that territory, if you've noticed. They don't even see it as a priority. It's like, but you're supposed to lead. So I don't want to say more, because if I say more, it comes across as just bashing the police. But I'm like, look, at some point, this is not just a rank and file problem, because you're law. And I suspect this is not a unique thing in the TTPS. It's worse in the Defense Force, and it's widespread in public service.
It's not a unique thing in law enforcement.
No, but I think it's widespread in public service.
No. When I say law enforcement, I'm not talking about law enforcement.
Not alone. You mean around the world?
So law enforcement has challenges like this.
But I also think, first of all, Defense Force is technically not law enforcement.
No, they're not law enforcement.
And they have stricter rules, I would imagine. And I think it's worse there. That's number one.
Yes.
Number two, I think similar things happen in the public service. I have heard these stories of a public sector office wanting to have fingerprint scanners to stop people from signing in for their friends. And what do? They mash up the scanner.
Yeah.
Right?
We don't want the accountability, because we really don't want the accountability, because it restricts certain type of behavior, right? And we are comfortable with that type of behavior, and that behavior extends into the area that we talk about when in road traffic.
Right, but let me just, you want to enforce our laws? Now, I could be wrong about this, but this is an AI scan, so forgive me, I'm doing this for time, because I didn't intend to use this as an example. You want to enforce our laws? Buggery laws apparently were reinstated in March 2025. Now, if you think that only one sexual identity runs afoul of buggery laws, I kind of doubt that, right? So I'm just saying, what laws do you want to enforce? Because someone decided to appeal the initial court ruling to kind of try to remove buggery laws. Somebody in this country appealed it, right? It's not an anti-gay, it's not for gay men alone.
Sean, why you choose that one?
No, because I'm just saying, what do you want to enforce? Let's enforce everything. You want everything enforced? Let's enforce everything. Definitely keep your private life private, because there are men and women that like to do things, and apparently if we want to enforce, as you say, you use extreme examples at times to point out the fallacy in the alleged principles or logic. We do have a call. We have other stuff to get to, but we do have a call. St. James and Line, caller, good morning, you're on here.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I want to change the topic a little bit.
Sure.
Here, but it is relevant anyhow. I can't recall anyone asking or raising this. I am not trying to create mischief or cause any couture. It would be interesting to get some feedback from the 1% community on their feelings about the Iran issue, Iran war, that is. Their feelings on the time, on the stance taken by Kamala government with relation to supporting Trump on the Iran issue. I know that two certain members of the government have stated their views and that the 1% community must have a view. As I said, not trying to create mischief. It's interesting to get their view since they obviously would have ties in that region. Any comments? By Alice Norfolk.
Thank you, caller. Well, ironically, I don't think it's so straightforward because as far as I'm aware...
Before we even consider that 1%, I still would like to know who is considered to be the 1%.
Right, so I assume you're speaking to our racial demographic.
And that is unfair.
From the Middle East?
And it might...
Yes, because 1% is actually a lot wider than you think.
I understand where he's going with it.
Yeah.
But it might be an unfair assessment because not only does...
Well...
And not only... There are a number of persons across Trinidad and Tobago have different opinions and views as to what is taking place in Iran and Iraq and the wars across there and how it is happening. There are persons who are not of the Muslim faith who have the opinions.
Yes.
There are persons who are of the Muslim faith who have the opinions. And I'm saying this should not be about whether or not you are of one faith or other. It's about a bigger geopolitical issue.
I understand that, but technically the caller is pointing to what you can observe in other parts of the world. Now, the thing is, it's the Syrian and Lebanese community, right? Now, if you want to say the Lebanese part of that, then there is a direct connection there because Israel is also conducting strikes in Lebanon, right? That said, the Lebanese government has reached the point now where they're basically saying, hey, let's just get rid of Hezbollah because this is ridiculous, right? Now, to what extent are they going to be hostile to Israel and Israel's going to be hostile to them? I haven't kept up to date. But the point is there's violence there, so I understand that.
Yeah, I understand.
Syria and Lebanon technically isn't Iran, and also most of our Middle Eastern diaspora that's been transplanted here for a significant period of time. So we're talking third generation, fourth generation, whatever. Most of them, as far as I'm aware, are not Muslim. So they don't have quite a direct connection to what's going on in Iran, right? Whereas, ironically, what we have is two government politicians of East Indian descent, but they do have the religious connection, right? And to me, I think it's more about the religious connection because the politics in the region, to some extent, is tied to religion. And the violence and the politics are kind of divided in a way along those religious lines. We have it racially, they have it religiously, because you have Christian Arabs, and you have, to some extent, culturally and racially. The Israelis are not that far removed to their neighbors, but the main distinction is religiously, and the politics gets wrapped up into that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's
not as simple as just...
It's
not as simple...
Our Syrian Lebanese community is rather quite westernized, or rather quite liberated, at least by now. And like I said, I don't think they have that set of ties to Iran, right? And they may have strong opinions, but they tend to not put out their strong opinions there anymore.
They have strong opinions, but it might be conservative in terms of how they are. They express their views, and I think that is reasonable because it's a very controversial topic, and
I think also
any views expressed by any person can be misread or misinterpreted. How you express your views.
I think also, to some extent, the international community, you've had Ukraine, Russia, then you had Israel, Palestine. So when America came and started airstriking and took Maduro, they just, at some point, we kind of got desensitized a bit, right? And now that this stuff is happening in Iran, again, we still haven't gotten over Israel-Palestine. That hasn't been resolved.
Anybody has been discussing, nobody's considering what is taking place between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Oh, Pakistan, yes. I haven't even looked into that.
Yeah,
yes. No, because case in point, how many times you hear about violence in Africa and that almost never moves the needle either here or in the Western world?
Exactly. So we have a caller.
Okay, yeah, we have a caller. Well, we'll take the call. Caller, good morning, you're on here.
A very pleasant morning, Sean, ESP Ashraf,
Morning.
A pleasant morning to my San Fernando colleague. I want to raise an issue concerning the police. And it is something that favors the police. The police has been under attack from time immemorial. And I heard of PSA getting a 10%, teachers getting rise in salary. And from time to time, carnival to carnival and different activities taking place, SOE and SOE. I'm not hearing anything about a raise in salary for the police.
They got
the
a
Welfare
5%
Association is not keeping the public up to date if they need to concerning any raise in salary. And I know they have been negotiating for a while. So I don't know if the ASP has any information on that. But I think that the police, they're overworked, they're burnt out, and they need to be compensated one way or the other, and motivation need to be both intrinsically and extrinsically. So can you assist with that, Sean or ASP?
No, there was a report recently. The CPO,
they made that 5% off.
for 2020 to 2022, right? Now, in theory, I have no issue with it if that's all that we could afford. It's just that somebody got 10%. So now I'm like, well, what is fair at this point, right? What is fair? I just want to know what is fair. What is everybody winning? Because if everybody winning is 10% for one and 5% for the rest, somehow that don't look like everybody winning.
And my argument will be a bit controversial. It cannot be across the board.
Well, yeah, we know that.
It cannot be 10% across the board.
Yeah, we know that.
And that is where I continue to say this negotiating, and when you're going to negotiate, somehow or the other, I believe that when the CPO and whosoever is setting this arrangements or this cap, they're not understanding. It is not about.
It's not the CPO.
No, like I said, whether the CPO who
by
else,
law, right? Because it's weird. There's two sections. One says he gets advice from the minister, and then like one or two lines underneath that, he follows the instructions of the minister. I'm paraphrasing, but as he said, so it's kind of weird. But when you go low enough, and you don't have to go that far, right? It's not the CPO, it's the Minister of Finance.
So, like I said, the minister and who else?
Well, yes, yeah.
So I'm sorry, the CPO and who else? I will just leave it there, right? Because that is not the issue about, not who is setting the cap. I am saying the cap itself. Because I am simply saying that there needs to have understanding. Fire service, prison services, police, the defense force, and public servants on the whole. All of them are individual and have different roles and functions. If you tell one party that they're getting 10, is it that we, and if you say, okay, public servants getting 10, we are public servants, police officers are public servants also, right? But as public servants in a different category, because there are public servants that fall under the essential services. That's a different category. Are you considering that extent that they can't protest, they are at a higher risk than some other entities? What is the risk factor? What is the risk factor associated? No, there's a lot of things that negotiations persons don't know happening across the negotiating table.
Well, let me tell you one of the issues that I myself have kind of forgotten, but I believe I've raised this maybe only once. What does 5% mean for the PSA versus the TTPS versus the fire service? Because we are just comparing percentage numbers.
Yes.
But a 5% for like pilots might be more than a 10% for the PSA. I doubt that, right? It might be more per individual than the 10% for the PSA, or it might not. We don't know. And again, it goes back to, you don't want to reveal the cost of the immigration stuff. Why is it that when we debate these issues, now we just kind of fall into well, let's debate the percentage numbers. We don't know what the real figures are. And we don't have any deeper analysis to justify this figure for this group versus that figure for that group, because I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that because, you know, the 10% for the PSA, now granted, is $3.8 billion in back pay, and that's probably the real economic issue, right? But the 10% for PSA might be as reasonable as the 5% for some high-earning group, but we don't know. All we get is a percentage point. My issue is twofold. One, you gave one group the 10%, and I believe when you made that campaign promise, you didn't spell this out on the campaign trail. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was, amongst other union members of other unions, some amount of expectation that, well, the new government is not going to do what everybody criticized the old government doing with regards to you're wicked with the 5%, you're wicked with 5%. Because my thing is, if you want to be fair, let's just say that the percentage is relatively equal, right? Rather than giving one group 10%, you could give multiple groups 6%,
so listen,
7%.
And that is where, when you look at how it is banded across when we have elections.
Because they didn't clarify. It's only and will only ever be for this group.
What probably my interpretation might be wrong, but it's my personal interpretation about it, is that the discussion would start at 10. That is my perspective.
For everybody else?
No.
For the PSA?
Yeah, it would start at 10. That's what my perspective is. It started at 10, it didn't say it have to go beyond 10, it said it started at 10. So if you start at 10, you got 10. This is my argument from how I view it now. If you're saying we're going to start at 10, it means that everybody has to start at 10.
Right, thank you.
If we are starting at 10, there could be conversation, and I am saying there is nothing should have been, in negotiation perspective, very unrealistic unrealistic expectation that somebody would say, I'm going to start negotiating at 10 and negotiating a negative. And say, hey, okay, I want to get 10 more, I'll get 9.
Now, here's the best part. Felicia Thomas, I believe, if I'm not mixing up my union leaders, she presented the start at 10. And of course, that's the implication in everybody's head. Or the floor is 10, and who knows, it might go up. Meanwhile, after the budget, the minister, to justify why he did not budget for the back pay payment in terms of fully cash, right? Well, you know, it starts at 10, but it could be 0, it could be 5. We don't know how much it's going to be. And I feel as though before the election, they wanted to obscure,
right. So that was
and now they can't walk it back.
So that was a logical, just like you were telling me, the reasonable approach. That's what negotiations are about. And it could have been less. You could come to the table with 10. But I am saying I can't give you 10, I'll give you 9, I'll give you 8, I'll give you 7, or I could give it up. But the problem is that over the years, when you hear a figure presented to the unions, it is highly unlikely that figure will go less.
Not just that, the narrative was 5% is wicked, right? So this got the unions on their side.
Right.
And I'll always say, look, they made the promise. We know they made the promise. They did it in full view of the public. Can't fault them for giving the PSA the 10%. What I can't fault them for is not even not giving the other unions 10%. It's not having a good explanation, right? Even if it's just to say, look, we thought we could have maybe given everybody more, but once we came into power, we realized things are bad. If they just said that up front, at least half of the criticisms over this coming, well, maybe the unions won't stop, but at least the public would be less inclined to be on that bandwagon. But because they're kind of like not talking about it and don't want to admit nothing, I am left to be like, didn't you realize this was going to happen?
And so in this conversation of the negotiations, whether or not 5% is reasonable in circumstance, financial circumstance.
Yeah, because we don't know what the money-wise what it means.
5% can be reasonable in the financial circumstance. 5% could be reasonable, a reasonable increase for the current salary arrangements for a particular sector of individuals. Reasonable. That is not what persons are looking at, whether it's reasonable or not. Because really and truly, we don't have reasonable thinking public servants.
Well, also,
We have public servants who are looking at it from a financial perspective alone. They hear 10% and they want the 10%. Everybody wants the 10%.
But I would argue part of that is the leaders managing expectations.
Exactly.
Right? Now, listen, this is why I didn't have an issue necessarily with PNM giving out 5%, because I could kind of see why. Now, you could maybe make an argument, why couldn't it have been 6%, 7%? Why, it didn't, but they were stuck on fine. But the jump to 10, I'm like, something is not going to work out here. I just didn't know before the fact how it would play out.
This is a new negotiating period for essential services. A new negotiating period. PSA period was a different period.
Yeah.
So this is a new period on the table. Taking everything into consideration, personally, this is me personally, I really don't feel 5% is going to make a significant input
for most of the police service
officers
and the fire service. Probably.
You have to take into consideration not the financial position alone. You have to take into consideration the other factors surrounding these entities. What the
higher level of risk
and also
and loss of life.
There is nothing I am saying. There is no amount of money that can be given to an officer, to officers who work within this environment that will be satisfactory to cover compensation of loss. I think there's a risk factor that we accept taking these jobs.
Yeah.
But having accepted those risk factors, I am saying it should not be because you accept the risk factors that you're not being reasonably remunerated for the amount of work that you have been required to do. Now, there's an argument I could put on the opposite side of it. The question will be, what are they really doing or being paid to do? Because there's an other side that persons are jumping on the argument that people saying, so what do police really do? Because when you look at it from the argument on the other side, there's reasonability when it comes to that. And I always like to be very reasonable in my approach on addressing situation, not being very objective. Crime is high still. There's a lot of issues surrounding how police transparency operates, whether policing is effective enough. So when you take all of that into the whole conversation, and if you want to take that into the conversation, because it's really part of the conversation that a lot of persons are utilizing to make judgment, whether it's a fair judgment or not, a fair assessment or unfair assessment, that is, we have to agree that is part of it. Is 5% really reasonable? That's a big question and other persons could ask. You may ask some officers, they would say, based on their salary range, they might say 5% might be reasonable enough. But when you look at cost of living, because police officers, fire officers, and public servants, they don't have a separate cost of living, you know. They face the same cost of living like every one of us. We all face the same cost of living. We all face the groceries. We all face everything the same. Right? So you better look at it holistically. If there's economic and financial situations in the country at this point in time that we cannot facilitate additional salaries or additional increases, all I am saying is that you had to come out and say something. We have reasonable persons, we have unreasonable individuals. But you see this thing where you keep coming and saying, on one hand you say you could give, and when time to give you could say no, you don't want to give. Come out straight and tell me the truth now.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me, we may consider it, but at this point in time, just tell me you're considering it.
Past administration said they couldn't give. I didn't kick up of us on that line of logic. I'm not going to now turn around and say, but UNC, give. No. But the inconsistency and the lack of communication. Now, I'll say this. One, with regards to essential services, underpaying. Yes, you could never pay fully. But underpaying does run the risk of not getting enough good applicants to maintain your service, right? And case in point, Singapore pays their politicians a high salary to prevent corruption. I don't want to go too far into this.
I'm glad what you're bringing that. There are law enforcement agencies across some of the world who their logic or their methodology of reducing criminal behavior within their departments and strict measures if you go beyond by ensuring that the officers are adequately compensated for the work that they are performing.
Because if you're paid more, you could demand more qualifications, and you could also have more stringent working conditions.
And I could demand more of you because I am paying you to a higher rate, or I should say the best rate that I can, so that I expect much more of you.
And then the last thing is on this, and I want to go to the video to speak about public safety. I think the public needs to come to terms, because I more or less thought of this, but technically it's not illegal, right? It's not illegal. One could argue if it's ethical, because basically the PSA president on a UNC platform, which as far as I'm aware she's not supposed to do as PSA president, but on a UNC platform, basically announced to the country, yeah, the UNC bought our votes with 10% promise. Now there's nothing illegal behind it, right? It's a quid pro quo, it's a political favor for a favor. Hey, that came up with regards to the independent senators, accusations of senators, right? But that's what it was, right? And we all saw it, and nobody kicked up a fuss about it, but that's what it was. And that's why, when time came now that the government wanted to try to maybe walk certain things back and implied so in various subtle ways, oh, we can't give you all the back pay in cash. Oh, it might not be 10%, it could be 5%, it could be 0%. What did the union do? They rightfully went to the public. They didn't necessarily expose everything. They didn't come out and say, hey, we voted for you, you owe this to us. But what did they do? They went to the press. They kicked up a fuss, and slowly but surely the government had to concede certain things. They got their 10%. The whole back pay situation is still up in the air. I was surprised to hear that the CPO admitted they still haven't finalized the back pay.
Because, like I said, and people, this is my personal views. So you can take me to task if anybody want to take me to task. They're my personal views. We got to be reasonable.
Yeah. But
10% is not cash.
They made the promise before knowing exactly what the finances of the country was, which you can ask any actual economist that has more than a bachelor's degree in economics what the country's financial position was. They didn't need to know the Ministry of Finance figures to say, hey, you can't give 10% out willy-nilly.
And that is what we have an expectation, because you see, this is where how our negotiation processes go. A lot of the times persons ask for cash.
Proper leadership.
Right? No.
Proper leadership technically would have ironed out the details in advance. But if you iron out the details in advance, if you want to do that, all of a sudden it becomes a debate. We don't want to debate the issue. We just want the votes now. And we'll solve it after the election.
We have an issue with everybody wants, you want your money, I want my money now. Did our former Prime Minister say so?
I think...
You say, I work for my money, give me my money.
I don't know if people don't understand the implications of we poor. We poor. The Ministry of Education can't pay all their bills.
No, there's a perception of being poor.
We're poorer than we've ever been. We have stand on the line, call good morning, you're on here. We live
morning, Sean. Morning, Mr. Ali.
Morning, sir.
To the caller from St. James, Sean.
Yeah.
Who asks about what he would like to hear about the comments on or they call them 1%. I don't call them 1%. I have a friend who is, and we say Syrian Lebanese in Trinidad, but they are distinct. They are Syrians and they are Lebanese.
Yes.
I have a extremely good friend who is Lebanese. Come from that line. His father came here, and he was first generation Trinidadian, so he not Trinbagonian. He has grandchildren now, and we were having this discussion last night. We sat down together. We were talking for about almost 3 hours, and they are Christian.
Yes.
When you talk about Lebanon, you always hear in the bomb in southern Lebanon when Israel has issues with southern Lebanon, and they are northern Lebanese and they are Christian. And it's surprising to know that they are in that community. He was telling me about his other friends and his family, and they are on the side of Israel in this instance. And it's a lot of us don't think they are religious, but a lot of these Lebanese in Trinidad are very religious. They are very religious. I have seen, we have done video calls, and I've seen Lebanon, how beautiful northern Lebanon is. It's like Paris. So they are on the side, and he always spells it out to me in the Bible. They are on a lot of them on the same trajectory thinking with Israel. He spells it out to me in the Bible, and he pulls his Bible and he shows me, this is what God said, and this is what God said, and this is what God said. So a lot of to the caller from St. James, it was interesting to me as well to find out how deep they think of this issue with them, and how they align themselves with Israel, and it is what it is. I just wanted to answer the guy from St. James. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. Now, I think we need to understand one of the least talked about things in that part of the world is the persecution of Christians, because Christians is the religion that most people love to hate. So, you know, who really wants to, particularly the Western world. And one of the things, though, is, to be fair, a lot of this is born from a time where society was more brutal and various civilizations more frequently warred with each other, right? This is one of those holdovers, you could say, with regards to that part of the Middle East, with regards to certain parts of Africa. Other parts of the world, that dimension has been replaced with something else, right? Like gang violence and the like. You don't necessarily have gangs like how you have Latin American cartels quite the same way in the Middle East. They don't have that problem. They have their own triggers for violence. But yes, it's oversimplified. I think a lot of people are like, all of Islam is the same, and you lump it all in one boat, and all of the Middle Eastern countries are the same, and you lump them all in one boat. It's like, listen, we can't even get all of CARICOM on the same page. Come on, come on. Now, all right, I want to switch gears a little bit, because this was somewhat graphic if you saw the actual video. I have edited out the impact, but there was a situation that happened, I believe, yesterday or the day before, and this was shared to me, and I thought this was a good starting point on the conversation of public safety. So it's time to cue this. And they just faded away, but if you notice, there was someone walking on the highway. And what I don't understand is, I don't know if, Director, if you could kind of give us a still of the last 2 seconds, somewhere in the last 2 seconds. But the first car swerved to avoid him. First car didn't swerve to avoid him. No, when I say the black SUV, it didn't. Well, he's in the right lane.
The first car didn't swerve to avoid him.
So what, they just missed him?
So the first car changed lane. That SUV changed from the left onto the right. Good?
Uh-huh.
And he almost will run into that car.
Okay, right, yes.
He almost walked into the... So
if you notice, I think the SUV has a delayed reaction of pulling to the left.
I'm not saying that the SUV wrong, eh?
Right.
So the SUV, the driver of the SUV changed his lane, had no expectation
Yes.
that somebody was coming straight to him.
But what I don't understand is, you almost got hit by a car and you did not break your stride.
But he could not have. Because watch what
the
happened.
Pedestrian?
Yes, this driver who's coming here afterwards had no choice.
No, when I say stride, I'm talking about the pedestrian.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I am confused as to...
Unfortunately, that driver who got involved in an accident, is unfortunate that he did.
Yes.
But I don't think that he had any chance in that accident.
No, because to me, and I could be wrong, but listen, I see cars overtaking you without a speedometer. I can't necessarily, oh, you're speeding, or you're being reckless, right?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I think this is around 80, maybe 90. He's on the highway.
No, but even when the SUV would have cut in front of him,
yes,
he would have decelerated a bit, right? With his anticipation, because a vehicle cut in front of him, and to proceed. This driver had no expectation that I don't think he even saw this.
Because you're
this
watching
person.
the car.
Yeah.
Your concern
It's
is,
the car, not
I have to worry about the cars around me.
It's after the SUV passed.
And this is my
then
issue.
Then you actually pick up that individual.
I cannot understand why you would try to cross the road now. What?
It is because that's not the first time this pedestrian did that. Just like many of the pedestrians who are in this area here, right? It's not the first time. Unfortunately, it would have been his last. And because now he is a statistics, his family is traumatized, together with the driver is traumatized.
Yeah.
And the family and the driver will have to live with that trauma that he caused the death of an individual where he was not really fully responsible, because I can't, honestly speaking, I don't want to be in this position of this driver.
Yeah.
Because this is a very difficult situation to even get out of.
On the basic level, let's just go at the very most basic level. I'm in a serious accident, right? That means I have a whole process to go through, right? My vehicle is significantly damaged, but then you have to add on to that now. It's not significantly damaged, but everybody walked away. Somebody died. So now I have to go through the process, which is kind of mundane but arduous, with that over my head, right? But here's the thing, and we've mentioned this before. Now imagine if it was the black SUV that hit him.
And the other vehicle might have crashed in front of him.
Right, because it's not like people have experience in accidents. One of the things that I think about is, I hope that if I'm in a situation, I'll respond properly, but you don't know, and you only have seconds to decide. Yeah, if the SUV now got hit, or hit the guy, they might have broke because they're trying to not hurt the guy, right? And by braking them, if that car, applied the brakes, this car could have come from behind. And I'm just saying, I think we should be very grateful that there weren't cars, because this is the right lane. There weren't cars behind this driver who would have then come from and hit him from behind, and so on and so on.
And we talk about the challenges we're facing on the roads, right? We like to complain about police officers overbearing on the road and all of this, but there's an argument for another conversation. You could argue that, but you see, this is what I'm saying.
No, wait. I don't want to push that aside, because think about it. If the police saw a guy trying to cross the highway in this manner,
police don't do nothing.
Okay, but they're supposed to, not so.
And this is where I'm coming with.
Well, right, because the members of the public would want to complain any moment. Why you bothering me for?
Even with that, what is our law with respect to crossing the highways?
That's a good point. I myself, yeah.
The only thing that I'm aware of right now, when involved in an accident, there is the police will do a preliminary investigation. There's an accident. There's a determination as to how you classify an accident, who is wrong, who contributed, who not contributed. There's a particular classification. There's a classification called, for pedestrians, we call heedless to traffic. Right. So you see all those individuals who believe, all those pedestrians who believe that when I walk in front of a vehicle and I get bounced, the driver wrong, let it think twice.
I mean, listen, you want to play that game in a busy street in Port of Spain, San Fernando, that's one thing. This is the highway.
But we have a tendency in Trinidad and Tobago to blame the drivers of the vehicle that gets involved in an accident with a pedestrian, and always want to blame the driver. He was driving too fast, he should have known better. I am simply saying this. This is not the driver's fault, because I am driving on the highway. I have no expectation to see someone crossing the highway or running across the highway.
And especially at a part, it's one thing if you're crossing the highway at a junction with traffic lights. This is in the middle of nowhere.
This is right out of the Port of Spain, coming out of Port of Spain.
Right. No, but my point is there's no traffic light. There's nothing to slow traffic down. Exactly. This is where traffic is going.
But when the incident took place, when there was an incident that took place a number of years ago, just south of the Cedars traffic lights, there was a lot of outcry for a pedestrian walk.
Yes, because a Maxi, I think,
right?
for whatever reason, went into the...
And families lost their members. Big outcry.
Yes.
Good. The then administration took heed, put a walkover.
Yes.
Be it where this accident took place is I would say, a very reasonable walk, to the walkover.
That same walkover.
Same walkover. However, even in that same pedestrian, the walkover, you have persons who cross under the walkover. And here, and you know what they're saying? They're not walking, they're not using the walkover.
Yes, there was an accident not too long ago.
Exactly.
Where that same thing happened, and in my mind.
And if we keep this argument that walkovers have to be placed to accommodate pedestrian traffic crossing at different locations, then every single point along the highway you have to put a walkover, the whole highway will be a walkover, right? Because we are citizens, we don't want to walk from point A to point B for our safety. We want to risk our safety because here we were saying the driver on the highway have to stop.
Yeah, that's...
he can't bounce me.
I'm not playing that game of chicken.
But you're playing, playing game of...
Because the problem is you can get away with it once, maybe twice, maybe 100 times. But if you do that in your life, it's going to be, at some point you're going to roll.
At some point you're going to lose. And I always say, sometimes it is not about you, the pedestrian, crossing the road. You might survive. The driver of the vehicle and some other innocent individual could end up losing their life.
Because, now granted, it would have to be very stark, but there are circumstances where hitting a pedestrian could lead to the car having a more extreme accident, right?
Yeah.
Depending, right? But then also, again, and what if a car hit them from behind and then you had a pileup? Because a couple of weeks ago or so, or maybe like a couple months ago or a month and a half ago, somewhere I think before Carnival, there was that multi-car accident.
Yes, because there was some spillage on the road.
Right, so that could happen with a pedestrian depending on how dense the traffic is. Granted, if the traffic is extremely dense, then you would see a little bit of a slowdown. But there's a median where you're going at 70 to 80.
Once a driver see any object on the road, any reasonable thinking driver,
he's going to try to avoid.
We're going to try. He or she is going to try to avoid it.
You're not always going to know what's next to you.
And that is the risk you're going to face because you are concentrating on trying to avoid that. Sometimes you forget there's another person another vehicle coming, and it could cause another accident.
Listen, you might survive. What if you cause someone else to die?
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying.
But and then here's the other thing, and this might be kind of insensitive, but I'm going to say it anyway. What was the aftermath? They had to have a van block the lane where he was in. So 2 lanes in the side that this accident happened were blocked off. And then there was a slowdown of traffic. I don't know if it's because of daily traffic or Macoism, right? Because I know we all know traffic slows down to Maco accidents, right?
Both contributed to it.
Right? Now one individual deciding to, you would think, oh, well, I'm risking my life. Why do you care? No. You endanger the lives of the drivers in the immediate area, and then you inconvenience a significant section of the population for the rest of the day. That's why.
And then let's consider that the individual didn't lose their life. They may have sustained some serious injuries.
Yes.
Who is compensating the driver for his vehicle?
Yeah.
When you are
either way, whether they survive or not.
So you tell me, I mean, it's hard on a driver in this day and age now to go, his insurance going up.
This makes me think, this is making me wonder, and I think this is wrong, but it's making me wonder, should dash cams be mandatory? Because if it was with the dash cam, all of a sudden we might be condemn the driver, blah, 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 blah.
So the dash cam gave up the dash cam gave an exact perspective of what was taking place.
By the way, case in point, Commissioner, you see what it could do for you? Just saying. Just say it. I know that's
right. But it's unfortunate that this situation happens, but I am hopeful. I continue to be hopeful that our citizens understand that the risk you are taking by crossing the highways, even if you get away 100 times, it's only take one
Yes.
Once. That one time might be the last of the 100.
There are certain things I don't have an issue with enforcing the laws for. But they don't all need to be some heavy-handed penalty. Maybe some of them do. Maybe some of them do. But there are certain things I don't have an issue enforcing the laws for. Anything that deals with the potential death of someone, the inconvenience is not a reason to have heavy-handed laws here, right? Right? But the death of someone, whether it's the pedestrian or the driver, this is not something to be underestimated. Now, before we end up, we have just enough time. I guess for what it's worth, we might have to do this quickly. Let's run the other clip.
Standing relationship with the DEA. We have a long-standing relationship with the FBI. We have a long-standing relationship with other intelligence agencies around the world, and the reciprocity of lists happens on a constant basis. But I'd like you members of the media to ask Roger Alexander why he is not the minister in charge of intelligence under the SSA. Gazetted in the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, the laws of Trinidad and Tobago in the SSA Act says that the minister with responsibility for national security is the minister who deals with the SSA, which is our intelligence agency. In Trinidad and Tobago, that portfolio for the SSA under the SSA Act, which says you must be the Minister of National Security, is actually the Attorney General. John Jeremy, Attorney General of this country, is the person that manages the SSA. I want you to ask Minister Alexander if the US actually shares information with him. And if they don't share information with him, ask him why. I also would like you to ask Minister Sturge if they share information with him. And if they don't share information with him, ask him why.
Now, we don't have time to unpack everything, but there's two things. First, the minor point, we don't necessarily go into it. Intelligence agencies technically, traditionally, are a national defense function. So I would argue Minister Sturge, traditionally, that should be where it's placed. But we use it for more anti-crime functions than anything else. So
I could say clearly that that minister is just not understanding what he's saying.
Okay, fair enough.
Right?
Fair enough.
That MP understand what he's saying.
With regards to which part?
Everything he's saying right now.
Because
here's why I could poke holes in it.
Go ahead. That's why I brought it up.
Under the past administration, there was one Minister of National Security.
Right. Okay.
Good. Those entities fell under the Minister, under the Minister of National Security, under the portfolio of Minister of National Security. Now the Ministry of National Security has been split. Hold on. It has been split. Where does it say that when an administration takes over, changes in the portfolios cannot be realigned? Where does it say it?
Now, I'll say this.
Because what he's implying, and it's a very dangerous implication, what he's implying, there's he's treading on some...
No, well, here's this. Now, granted, yes, there should not be anything to stop them from making the changes. The question is if they did everything to the satisfactory of the law, if the law says it's not, if it's something other than the Attorney General. Right? But I think he said that as to set a foundation for the wider point, right? Which is the back after what he said. Why did they have to change it to the Attorney General? Because again, traditionally, this is not something you put under the Attorney General.
You are trying to make inferences. I'm going to use intelligence language. I've been part of it. I'm going to use intelligence language. He's making inferences.
Okay, stick up in there. Because while on some level, I'm not going to say the inferences are illogical in the sense of if you said the sky is red, that is illogical, right? Semantic arguments notwithstanding. But he's making inferences. I'm glad you brought that up because I also thought, I remember when his prime minister did that to Gary Griffiths. Made a lot of inferences. Or there's this thing, and we had a whole FUL thing, and an investigation on a thing, and a report, and we had to pull the merit list, but we had to put him back on, and we never, the public, actually got anything concrete.
And what
And that is an issue that I brought up before, to be fair.
And that sort of...
To be fair to the government.
And to be fair to anyone, and to be fair to the administration at this point in time, that is dangerous inferences that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
Because those inferences that he's making has the tendency to have a lot of question marks on the character of the individuals, right? Because those are inferences, and we know, and I can say, when you're in intelligence, when you work in intelligence, when you make inferences are just as that, is that you just make inferences. You have to have supporting documentation to change that inference into some, that the inferences lead you to a perspective.
It's not going to be evidence to 100% prove it, but it needs to at least be enough evidence to say this is reasonable.
Right. So when you make an inference about something, it is that you're projecting or you're leading towards it, but you need support documentation to go there. So you have to be very, so that
because what Dr. Heath Rowley said about Gary Griffith, particularly on the local government campaign trail, which I asked him directly about local government night, ended up essentially being that, because we didn't necessarily see anything more. You are throwing out the inferences to the public, whether there's an investigation or court matter that's active behind the scenes, it's irrelevant, because you're throwing out the inferences without any supporting documentation to the public, right? And I have an issue with that, in part, but on the flip side, so it's kind of like 50-50.
So I would throw this,
Here's the thing. I think Dr. Heath Rowley's inferences on Gary Griffith, it fed into the conspiracy theories and the common narratives and the rumors. And I would imagine, for better and worse, you have similar things, not maybe so much with Sturge, Minister Sturge, but with Minister Alexander. There will be conspiracy theories and rumors about how he was as a police officer and how he operates and what laws or procedures he may or may not have broken. And those conspiracy theories, you know, I hate to say this, but for some people it writes themselves.
Yeah.
So you're piling on, but without anything supporting.
And that I am saying is very dangerous. It is a dangerous set of inferences that you're making. I do not think in our current environment at this point in time, such inferences or a statement of that nature should have been made to add to the level of conspiracy theories and misinformation about why these two particular individuals doesn't have that portfolio. And to push it out, you're asking the media to ask, why they don't ask that a direct question. Knowing Mr. Alexander, he's not going to answer that question. Yeah. Right? Knowing Mr. Alexander.
Even if it was the correct thing to do and the right thing to do and legal thing to do, he's not going to answer that question.
And I really hope that he don't even give that an answer, because that is because even if it satisfy or even give an answer for that question like that, based on an inference, it is, Sean, this is my personal.
Well, haters, so I'm going to hate regardless.
This is my personal view, because when I listen to that, when you make inferences about something like that, I know exactly how that inference is, why he put that out there, you know. Because yes, we can ask the question, how the information is shared. If it's shared. No, it might be because there's need to share the information with the Attorney General because of the nature of certain information that has to go for a particular direction. Right? Nobody wants to hear that. Right? But what do you want to hear? Why you didn't give it to the minister? Under the Minister of National Security, because there is something.
That part actually might legally be pertinent, because if you then modify the laws that spells that out to the SSA while changing the ministry portfolios, you leave a legal gap. Because there is no Ministry of National Security.
So there would have been, it would have been a better argument in my opinion, and I keep it to my opinion. I don't want anybody to say anything. In my opinion. It would have been a better argument, in my opinion. I don't know what his intention of bringing it out. He and he alone know what his intention.
It is to criticize the ministers.
But it would have been a better argument to find out if there was any change in the legislation or amendment to the legislation for the body to be put on the other side.
This goes again why I say it's a foundation for the comments. Because I believe at the end of the day, he was trying to point to the fact that, A, they are unsuitable to run the SSA, right? Here's the thing.
To oversee the SSA.
To oversee. I do think that there is smoke. The question is not if there is smoke. The question is, are the two individuals involved in the fire that's generating the smoke? Or at the very least involved in the manner that Mr. Awari says, right?
I wouldn't go as far as this. I wouldn't even go as far as
no, because smoke in the sense of, we know that generally speaking, certain aspects of our national security is unhealthy.
Smoke
but the problem is, because we just spoke about it, right? Why do we need the body cameras, right?
Yes,
What's going on with the Coast Guard, right? All of that, right? But that is a very general overview. Nothing of that technically, you could attach that to any specific current government minister, right? So you're kind of saying, hey, there's a perception of national security in the country. There's a perception of these guys. I am going to say 2 and 2 makes 4.
Let me try inference out one time. There could have been did anybody ask or direct a question to our former Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, why Mr. Arawi was removed from the Office of the Attorney General? I could infer it.
No, that's fine. No, what I'm saying is he's taking advantage of the ongoing perception of law enforcement in the country, right? Like I said, it's technically not illogical.
But you know that you're just
right.
You know that you are doing more harm than good. In
well, that's
that
the thing,
statement.
because I could have probably come to a similar argument, and I do think I have never gone that far with the argument to say that our partners are not. Now, I did spell out yesterday certain aspects giving the accusations some credence. So that's why I came today, and I brought the footage to let Ashraf see it, to give his comments, to give a counterpoint, because I realized at the end of the day, and I said this in the past, and other politicians do it. I single out Dr. Rowley, that's the example that is the forefront of my mind. I am technically very slightly connected to. But other politicians do it, and it bothers me, because you just throw stuff out there, nothing to back it up, and you make these grand claims of something being wrong, but you have no intention of actually resolving it. One of the other things is the whole Ralph Gonsalves thing.
Yes.
All of a sudden, we don't really care about that anymore. It only mattered before the election when you could just throw it out there, right? But in this case, it's national security. It runs the risk of having even worse unintended consequences, as you pointed out.
And I know we're going to wrap up. The irony behind it, it is rather suspicious, is that after we had the conversation where our Prime Minister went to the United States for this coalition.
He also brought up that Alexander wasn't sent there, but to me that's more easily explainable without needing anything, in the sense of you're not always going to send your entire national security apparatus to the conference. Right?
My question is, was there a need for it?
Or the Shield of the Americas to go?
My thing about it, was there a need?
For us to go?
No, the Minister of Homeland Security, was there a need?
To go?
There was and I'm saying that
yes.
Prime Minister, there's a judgment call in the Prime Minister of a Prime Minister in any conference to choose the particular individuals to go.
You can make the argument either Stage or Roger should have gone. But more importantly, this is more the Prime Minister engaging with the other heads of state. That's the level that this was at. A lot of the nuts and bolts would still have to be worked out regardless of who went, and that could be done at a later date. So, I mean, listen, like I said, I don't think what Mr. Arari said was illogical. But the problem is, without anything to back it up, how responsible is it to run with it and to give it weight? We could say, well, if it's true, it's bad, and maybe it should be looked into. But to kind of assume it to be true and operate under that basis,
it's dangerous.
Yes, because it might cause
irresponsible and dangerous,
unnecessary complications to an already tenuous situation. But it is what it is. Ironically, this is when Alexander should be speaking on his own behalf. But I don't know. I do. if you speak out against inferences, that means that your side can't infer anything in the future either. They're not going to do that.
You have to be careful.
Nobody is actually doing campaign finance reform. Just saying, right? Nobody actually wants to do it. Thanks to the callers. There was a question about noise pollution and the enforcement. We're supposed to get to that, but we've technically spoken about it before. So I think it's one of those things where it's hard to describe. But listen, police don't have body cameras. You think they have noise meters?
Decibel level meters.
Decibel level meters. So that's not fully explaining anything. I think it's just a situation where people are not actually coming together to try to get the job done. Let's just put it that way, right? So thanks, Ashraf, for joining me once again to close out the week. I don't know, maybe one of these days we'll have a properly boring news week in Trinidad and Tobago where nothing happens and you and I could just speak about, you know, some mundane slice of life stuff. But apparently, you know, these days are not those days. And I constantly am saying now, I miss boring. Folks, this is Talking About a WESN. Have a good weekend. Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Please do not speed and do not cross highways where cars are not driving slow. Hopefully, we could see each other next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. On this edition of the program, we're talking with a former member of parliament, in fact, a former Speaker of the House of Representatives, among other things, Mr. Nizam Mohammed. He has been, if you can remember, was assigned an assignment, let's put it that way, to find out the most he can, the best he can, and to do what was necessary, if that was possible, for the return of Trinidad and Tobago citizens who went to places in the Middle East, Iraq, and so on, found themselves in difficulty to get back here. The issue is that matter has not been resolved. There have been many reports about the condition under which those people, in a lot of cases, women and children, mothers and their sons, face continuing there. He was pushed to make a statement on the heels of, or I might say on the toes of the last election, telling people they should consider that those Muslims who were affected by that set of incidents not to vote if they felt that the government had not been doing enough to get their loved ones back home. The question is, what has happened? Mr. Mohammed, thanks for joining us. Good to have you.
And thank you for having me, Andy. I was really pushed to make that statement, but it was actually a soundbite that was carried by the